What we've done so far in fluids, let me just recap quickly. One, density, right? So we know that density is equal to mass over volume, so we did that. And after that we went on to learn about pressure. What is pressure? Force over area, which means force is pressure times area. Pressure times area is force, and pressure is measured in Pascal. Although we can use other units such as PSI and so on, Pascal is SI unit. And then after that we saw the pressure exerted by fluids, right?
Oh yeah.
So the pressure exerted by fluids.
Rho Hg.
Right. So the pressure by the fluid alone is rho Hg, and this is only by the fluids. But what is, yeah?
What if the fluids have some kind of movement to them?
We're going to do that after.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So pressure in fluids is rho Gh, that one. This is only by the fluid pressure. But then when you have a fluid, above the fluid we have the atmospheric pressure. And so we did that also. If you want to find out the absolute pressure at this point, the absolute pressure P is equal to the pressure of the atmosphere plus rho Gh. And I think I also mentioned to you that this part is also called, did I mention that? What is this part also called?
Gauge pressure.
Gauge pressure. Very well.
Oh.
Smells like a taco.
That's called the gauge pressure, which is the pressure that any gauge will be able to record. That is this. So if I put a pressure gauge into this liquid anywhere, the pressure gauge is going to record just that fluid pressure. It cannot record the atmospheric pressure. Now, to measure the atmospheric pressure, we have what is known as a barometer. Okay? Did I go through the barometer part of it?
Yes.
Which one?
Both
The mercury barometer?
Yeah.
Good. So, by just looking at the level of the mercury in the barometer, we can just figure out this pressure atmosphere, which is standard pressure is 1 atmosphere, which is also 1.01 times 10 to the power of 5 pascals. Okay. In PSI, it is like 14.7 PSI. That is normal pressure. Okay, so we know about this gauge pressure. Did I talk about a tire?
Yep.
I talked about a tire. So inside the tire, what you have is the absolute pressure. Inside the tire is the absolute pressure. Outside the tire is atmospheric pressure. So the tire gauge records only what is known as a gauge pressure, which is the inside minus the outside. Okay, so we saw those concepts, and then we also went through Pascal's principle. So Pascal's principle. Pascal's principle mainly states that while solids can transmit force, fluids transmit pressure. And as a consequence, we have F1 over A1 is equal to F2 over A2. So depending upon the change in the area of the fluids, you can expect bigger forces. So I explained to you about car brakes, right? Your car brake is a hydraulic. So hydraulics is basically built on Pascal's principle. So you'll be able to get a big force by applying only a small force. That is the main idea of hydraulics. Car brakes, your steering, power steering, and if you have noticed those excavators, like the excavators that dig the soil and all that and dump it here and there. So if you notice those excavator arms, you will see those pistons, and the connecting the piston is like black tubes which is the narrow one. So that is the narrow one, and that is the wider one. So you get a big force applied by just fluid pressure. Now, if you go to a service station to service your car, the car is lifted by a mechanism which is also hydraulic. There, the fluid used is
Hydraulic fluid.
what fluid to jack up the car? Air.
Yeah, air.
What is used is air. So Pascal's principle can, you can see how the car is, raised just by air pressure only. The same air that is being pumped into your tires. The same thing is basically used into that piston. That piston is a big one, and that is able to lift. So you are able to get, so when A2 is larger than A1, F2 is larger than F1. That's the main idea there. Okay. So car brakes, they work on this concept where you apply a force and you get a force out of that. But so if I apply a 10 Newton force, you can expect a 1,000 Newton force on the brake side. Now, for a car, that's fine. What about a bus? A bus is a heavy thing. Now, to stop the bus, the driver will have to apply a much bigger force, right? What about a train? The train will require, because the mass of the train is enormous. So do you think the driver of the train is more powerful than the driver of the bus? And the driver of the bus is more powerful than the driver of a car? What is going on there? So how is the driver of the train able to stop the entire train by pushing? How?
Complicated stuff.
It is the same Pascal's principle, but in the train and in the bus, they don't use the same braking system as your car. Your car uses a brake fluid, and you push, and the push gets felt over there. But in the buses and in trains, they use what is known as air brake. What is an air brake? Air brake is it's a kind of opposite of, okay, for the air brake, there is a compressor. First thing is a compressor, okay? Now, the compressor, that's a compressor, and the compressor is connected to the pump. And as you turn the pump on, the compressor gets compressed. The air gets compressed. It's just an air compressor. And from here, the outlet from here goes to all the brakes. And what does this compression do to the brakes? They release the brakes. Not apply brakes, they release the brakes. So whatever compression is actually sent from here is doing the opposite of what is done in your car. In your car, when you apply a force from here, that force applies the pressure, and that pressure applies the brakes. And when you don't touch here, the brakes are pulled out. There are those, what do you call that? Calipers? Yeah, the calipers make sure that, like it's pulled out. And so when you apply brakes, it presses down and then applies. Now, in the buses, it is the opposite. When the bus and the train, if the engine is off, the brakes are held by a very strong spring force. The brakes are actually held onto the brakes are actually properly held by spring forces when everything is off. When they turn the pump on, the compressor comes on and the air starts moving into the brakes, and what that air does is to pull the brake shoes away. And so what is to be done to apply brakes? Just release the compression. As soon as the compression is released, it just comes and hits. So that's why air brakes are pretty strong.
Is that why when you hear a bus or somebody stop and it goes?
Yeah, exactly. You hear all the hissing sounds because of that. Air brake. Yeah, so the driver is not necessarily powerful, because what the driver is doing is just release the air. So as soon as the air is released, the compression is lost, brakes are applied. And sometimes, when they're actually moving fast and they have to apply brakes, they release the compression and they don't have much control on how quickly the thing will stop. They don't have much of a control. That's why it is not a safe thing to drive behind them, because they can stop very quickly too. They can. So unlike us, there is a kind of limit. You can't apply too much force to stop and jam the brakes. In the train, if you have noticed inside on the train, you must have seen between one compartment and another compartment, there will be a tube dangling like that. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
All the compartments are connected by those tubes. So this tube is running everywhere through all the compartments. So when the driver turns on his pump, this is connected to all the compartments to the very end. And when the compression goes to all the compartments, all the wheels get released.
Are there more than just one pump? Because I feel like it'd be pretty hard to keep that pressurized the whole
I
time.
don't know how many pumps are there, but most probably one only. Because all you need is just turn it on and connect it there. It should be, and you know, pressure is transmitted everywhere. So if you compress here, it is going to compress everywhere. So those tubes are actually going to be compressed air. And they link them properly this way. So what happens when the driver pulls out the air? Or the compression is completely lost, and all the brakes hold together, which is very important. All the brakes are applied together. Because imagine the driver alone applies brakes on his wheels, but the compartments are actually still moving fast. That's not going to stop. It's going to buckle over. Yeah. Yes.
So you said that they don't have that in our cars that we drive. So why not?
Because it's a lighter car, so you don't require that. There's nothing wrong in having it, but if you have it, you won't have much control on how quickly it stops. It'll stop. Yeah, it will stop very quickly. Now, buses are heavy. Trains are very heavy. So, and you know, in commercial trains, you know, like where passenger trains, this compression tube also runs on the top like that. It also runs on the top, like it's connected to the top as well. And in each cubicle, there will be a chain. There will be a chain. So in case a passenger realizes somebody fell off from the train or something happened, there's a fire inside the compartment, okay? So as a passenger, you can just reach the chain and pull the chain down. So when you pull the chain down, you're releasing the compression. So in other words, in a passenger train, anybody can stop the train. But there are rules for stopping. So you can't just like say, all right, I want to get down here. Well, that's what. So the idea of air brakes is also Pascal's principle. So we have two kinds of brakes. One is the actual fluid brake, which is normally used in cars, and for buses and trucks and heavy vehicles, they use what is known as air brakes, and they're very effective. And yeah, so that's Pascal's principle. The next thing. I told you about a barometer, right?
Yeah, you did.
Let me talk about a manometer. A manometer is basically this. What is this?
That's a U.
That's a U-tube.
YouTube.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you pour some liquid into it,
Not YouTube.
when you pour some liquid into it, the liquid is going to stay like that, right? Same levels, because the pressure has to be same level. So the liquid will come to this level and stay there. Now, what will happen? So what's the pressure right above this?
Atmospheric pressure.
And here?
Atmosphere.
Atmospheric pressure. Now, what will happen if you connect this to a gas tank? You're connecting to a gas tank.
The water will shoot out the other side.
Not necessarily, yeah, I mean, if the pressure is too much, the water is going to be shooting out. But if the pressure is not too much, like you tie up a balloon or something like that, you know. So then what will happen is, because this thing has more pressure than the atmospheric pressure, so there will be extra push from here, right? So what will happen eventually is that this liquid will go down, and that will go up, and then it will settle down there. So now this is the liquid position. So the liquid has moved from this point to that point. So let me ask you, what's the pressure here on the top? Atmospheric pressure. Now, what's the pressure here at this point? This is atmospheric pressure. The pressure down here is PA plus rho GH. So the pressure here is PA plus rho GH. What's the pressure here? Same level. So same. So the pressure here is also PA plus rho GH. Which is the pressure here? You understand? Which is the pressure here? Which is the pressure here? Which is the pressure here? So this pressure, so to find the pressure of a tank, all you do is connect a manometer. You can connect the manometer, and by checking the level of liquids, you know the pressure here is atmospheric pressure, and the pressure at this level is the atmospheric pressure plus rho GH, and that will be the same pressure here, and that will be the same pressure here, PA plus rho GH. Now this rho GH is also called the gauge pressure. Alright. You can also use the manometer to find out the density of a liquid that doesn't mix with water. So here is how we do it. So that is this tube again. You pour water first, and the water settles down somewhere, and on top of water you pour oil. So when you pour oil, this is how it finally settles down. So that's oil, and that is how oil settles down, and water settles down there. So this is water, and this is the oil. So that's oil, and that is water. So what we do is this: the pressure on the top, the pressure here is atmospheric pressure. The pressure here is also atmospheric pressure. If you go down a certain depth, at this point the pressure is atmospheric pressure plus rho of water GH of water. This is H of water. And that should be the same pressure at this point. So the pressure here, the same thing. Now what is the pressure here? That's atmospheric pressure. The pressure here is going to be PA plus rho of oil, GH of oil. There will be a level difference between the two. Now equating those two, we end up getting rho of oil, GH of oil, is equal to rho of water, GH of water. So G cancels off. So if you know the density of water and the height of water and the height of oil, say let's say this is 8 centimeters and that is 10 centimeters, if you do it experimentally, you can just substitute rho of oil is equal to 1000, which is the density of water, times 8 over 10. So it will be 800 kilogram per meter cube. So this is a way of determining the density of oil by using this manometer. Now let's talk about Archimedes principle. So if you have a fluid, and if you imagine you have a solid inside the fluid. Imagine you have a solid inside the fluid. This is a fluid. This is density of fluid. And this is density of object. So you have two things here. One is an object sitting inside, and this is the fluid in which it is sitting. What is the pressure on the top here? On the top of the thing, it is PA, right? What about the pressure at this level? What is the pressure here? Let me call this height as H1. Then, what's the pressure here? Is it PA?
Here.
PA plus?
Rho GH.
Which row?
Rho Y.
Rho F GH1. It'll be rho F GH1. What's the pressure here? At this depth of H2. It'll be PA plus rho F G H2. The pressure is greater here than here, which means the pressure underneath here, is bigger than the pressure from the top. You get it? So let me call this P1. Let me call this P2. P2 is definitely bigger than P1. P2 is definitely bigger than P1. Always. Not just to this case. In all cases, P2 is bigger than P1. Now, if P2 is bigger than P1, what is this pressure going to do to the bottom of this object? It's going to push it, right?
Yeah.
If the area of this object is A, what is the force F2 from below? What's the force?
P2A.
Very good. P2A. Force is pressure times area, so that's P2A from the bottom. There's a pressure on the top. Is that going to push it from above? Yes, it is going to push it down from above with the force F1, which is what? P1A. So now looking at this block, it's experiencing two forces, one from below and one from above. Which one is bigger? From below is bigger, right? So which way will the net force be acting? The net force on the object will be acting upward, and that net force is called buoyant force, right? So the net force by fluid is called buoyant force. And the buoyant force is always upward. It's never downward. Buoyant force is always upward. And what is the buoyant force? It's a net force. So let's find out the buoyant force. Let's find out what is this buoyant force. Let's find out more about the buoyant force. I'm going to take this part off. Let's find the buoyant force. So what is the buoyant force FB? It's a net force, which is F2 minus F1, correct? And what is F2? P2A. So it's P2A minus P1A. And you know what is P2 and P1? Let's put all those things down. So what is P2? P2 is PA plus rho F G H2. Actually, I can take A common out, or you can just leave it like this. Or, yeah, times A minus PA plus rho F GH1 times A. Open the brackets. PAA plus rho F GH2A minus PAA minus rho F GH1A. And you can see that this cancels with that. And what is left out is this term minus this term. What can be taken common out of those? A and G. So I can take A and G and rho F So rho F, G, A taken common. And what is left out is H2 minus. You get it? Now what is this part? What is that part? Volume of the solid. So it will be like rho F G, volume of the object. Isn't the volume of the object the same as the volume of the fluid displaced? Volume of object is equal to volume of fluid displaced, correct? Yes? So if I have an object of 100 ml volume, if that goes into a liquid or a fluid, it is going to displace exactly the same volume of fluid. So volume of object is equal to volume of fluid displaced. Now in the honors class, we didn't go that deep. Right? We just mentioned it. Yeah, Jacob was here, right?
I know we just mentioned.
I don't think I went this way. I must have just given a final expression or something.
Yeah,
I don't think you went this way.
something like that. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, because now you should be able to understand this. That's why when you're in the honors class, I won't scare you by putting all these things here. I'll just simply tell you the final verdict. And so we just use only the last concept. That's it. Here you should be able to follow everything that I did here, and that's why you're doing this. So you know exactly what's going on. All right. Since the volume of the object is the same as the volume of fluid displaced, I'm going to write this one as rho F G VF. Now tell me, what is this? What is that part? What is the density of the fluid times volume of fluid? What is that? Mass of fluid. Good. So that part is the mass of fluid times G. Now what is that? What is that? The term for it. What is mg? Weight. So this is basically the weight of fluid displaced. So in other words, we have come to this expression that the buoyant force any object is going to experience is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. That is Archimedes' principle. Archimedes' principle is this. So you can write it down in, so the buoyant force is always equal to the weight of fluid displaced by the object. So if there's any object that is going into a fluid, it's going to displace the fluid. And how much weight of fluid is displaced is the buoyant force. Am I experiencing a buoyant force right now?
Yes.
Yes. Because I'm displacing air. What was in my place before I got to that spot? What is there is air. When I went over there, I pushed the air and I got in place. So what is the air trying to do to me? It's pushing me with less pressure on the top, but more pressure from below. Less pressure on the top, but more pressure from below to get me out of this place. Isn't that what happens in all companies and everywhere? You get to a certain position, a manager's position. You'll have a lot of pressure from people below you to kick you out of the place and get there. You don't have much pressure from above you. Those who are superior to you don't care about your position because you're lower, right? But those who are below you will always be like looking at you and trying to get to your place by knocking you out. So that's exactly what's happening here. The pressure from above is less, the pressure from below is more, and that gives you a buoyant force. So that buoyant force is trying to push you up. So right now, when I'm standing here, I am experiencing a buoyant force in the upward direction. And that buoyant force is what makes me feel slightly lighter. So if I'm standing on a scale, is the scale really actually checking my true weight? No. It is actually, so basically when I'm standing on a scale, there are two forces acting on me mainly. One is the weight pulling me down, the other is the buoyant force pushing me up. Thankfully, that buoyant force makes the scale go a little low. All right? It is not too much, but it is there. Remember this. Air has weight. The weight of air in this entire room, the mass of the air in this room is approximately 300 kilograms. 300 kilograms. Like I weigh 80 kilograms. So the mass of air in this entire room is around 300 kilograms. Which means the mass of air, the weight of air I'm going to displace is going to be definitely something, right? It's not like negligible. It's not negligible. It's definitely something. And that is the buoyant force that I'm experiencing. Now what if I step into water? I'll feel less weight. Why? Because the buoyant force now is more. Because you're displacing not just air but water. So the more and more you displace, so that's why when you go into water, you feel very light because the buoyant force is coming and pushing you up. The weight is actually still there, but the buoyant force is up. So how much is the buoyant force always? Weight of the fluid displaced. So what is Archimedes' principle telling me? Archimedes' principle tells the same thing. When an object is partly or fully submerged in a fluid, it will experience a buoyant force. And the buoyant force it experiences is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. Yeah.
So the Dead Sea, how people floated it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a really big buoyant force?
Yeah, so what's the buoyant force? So what is basically the buoyant force formula? You can write this down. This is an important formula. This is a very important equation. That one. So what is the buoyant force? Buoyant force is equal to density of fluid times G times volume of fluid displaced. Now you asked me about the Dead Sea. If you're going into the Dead Sea, the G is the same thing. The volume of the fluid. So what is happening in the Dead Sea is, since the fluid has more density to support your weight, it doesn't have to go too much in. That's why you float easily. If I'm going to water, but if I'm walking into water, by the time the water comes to my neck height, I'll be off the floor. Because the buoyant force will be matching up with your weight. You don't have to go fully inside. I don't think you can go fully inside. Because you'll start floating. Okay? Well, I'm talking about all these things, but the time when I almost died? I mentioned that. I mentioned that last week. Yeah, okay, so I don't. Who's a good swimmer here? Okay, who swims well? Okay. All right, so I can only I don't know swimming. All right, so absolutely no, because I didn't get a chance to learn swimming. So that is always in the back of my head. So when I was in Abu Dhabi in the year 1999, when my third son was only 2 years old, I used to take the 3 kids to the beach, which was just 2-3 miles away from my home in Abu Dhabi. So just take them to the beach, and then after that play with them, and then come back. And since I don't know the swimming part of it, I always try to do a little bit of floating just on when the water level is only that much. I'll try to float, and I can float. So I can just float and all that. But suddenly there is always a panic comes in, and then the panic will make me scramble for, getting a proper footage. So therefore, that's how it was always. One fine day in the month of October 1999, I took my kids just like normal. Normally I park my car, and then I have not the button type of keys, the normal keys. I take the keys because I can't keep it anywhere. So I put it into my pocket and then just put a pin and then secure it so the key won't go anywhere. Okay. Then I go into the water also because the key is still there. I can't keep the keys anywhere. So the car is parked over there, and then I just go to the beach. So I did that once, and I had a little float, an orange transparent tube. You know what do you call that?
Inner tube.
Lifesaver. What?
Life jacket.
Life, not a life jacket.
Air tube?
The tube.
Yeah, like the donut thing?
Yeah, donut thing. So where you just inflate it. It was not even a good quality one, it's just a toy. So I had that one with me. So I was just on the water, like holding that and then beating my legs, trying to stay afloat. And I was able to stay afloat. And all of a sudden the thought came to me, like, why can't I just do that with more water? In a place where there's more water, I should be able to, because I'm able to float like that, I should be able to do it. Wrong things at the wrong time, and very wrong time because the sun was just setting.
Oh.
The sun was just setting. My kids were actually making sand castles on the sand, and they didn't even see what I was doing. I started walking into the water, and I walked into the water when the water was like almost there. My feet is almost coming off, and then I said, okay, now it's the time. So I held on to this tube, lifted my legs off, and I started beating. And my view was towards my kids. So I was beating my legs, but I was beating it the totally wrong way. It was not like a swimming sort of an action. I was like splashing it like that. So I didn't realize the thing was going backward because it's splashing. I was moving backward. I was doing more like an exercise, like, let me stand there for more time. And I was just going on beating my legs like that. And after some time, I realized that, the distance seems to be like too much. My kids were like far away. And then that's the time when I just said, okay, let me just stop beating my legs. When I stopped beating my legs and I tried to put my legs there was nothing to put my legs. It was like, there was nothing there, it was just water. And I was like holding on to this dear thing. And then, and the water became cold because I was getting deeper and deeper. It was going further down. For some reason, everything happened at the same time. It became dark. And the thing started drifting backward. And I went further away from the land. I couldn't see my kids. It became dark. I could see buildings there, but I'm drifting away. And this thing went backward. And I was thinking of, like steering myself, holding on to one hand. But when I steer, I'm just turning around like this. And I said, no, that's, at least I want to face the buildings. I know that I'm not lost totally. And I was like waiting for help. My legs were having cramps because the water was cold. My legs were getting cramps and pain there and then the water was splashing in my face, and I don't like that also. And that was it was a tough time. You won't believe, I was like waiting for help, and there was nobody to help me, and it was dark, and I was almost lost, and I was beginning to think that, is this the end? Seriously, I started thinking, like, is this the end? Is there any way out of this situation right now? I'm lost, completely lost. Is there any help anywhere? And I was like struggling in this manner. 20 minutes. You won't believe that. It was a struggle. 20 minutes, not having any idea what is going to happen, how is the help going to come out. I didn't have any idea. Anyway, what happened then, all of a sudden I saw a black object in the water. It was the head of a person. Yeah, it was the head of a person, just like, almost that distance. Almost that distance, just the head alone, no splashing of water, nothing, just the black head. Well, black for many reasons. One, light was also bad. I couldn't even see properly, and I barely saw it. He's a person from Africa or somewhere, Sudan or somewhere. That is my guess. Because the head, from the shape of the head, I could find out that he must be from Sudan. And I saw that thing, and first I was like a little scared, but nothing can be more scary than my present situation. So I looked at it carefully, and it seemed like a head of a person. So I started asking for help. I said, "Can you help me?" And it looked like that person was like looking at me and then turning the other way around, because he thought like this guy with so much beard and all that with this toy, he has come all this distance and he's just playing around. Probably that's what went in his mind. So, but I was not even able to talk to him because my voice was choked, and the situation was totally different. I couldn't speak normally. I was like, the words were not coming out properly. It was all a different situation. And then I somehow attempted to again correspond with him, saying, please help me, I don't know swimming. And then after that I saw that person kind of drifting. I don't know what he was doing. He's just like moving like this. He was just drifting like this in the water. There was no splashing or anything. I don't know, he was pedaling or what he was doing at that time in the water at that distance. No idea. But anyway, he just came closer. When he came that close, I was just holding on to this tube, and all of a sudden I just took one hand off and just put it around his neck. I just took it around his neck because I needed another support very badly. And then he told me in English, which normally they don't speak at all there in the Middle East, they normally talk in Arabic. He replied to me in English saying, no, don't hold me, just hold on to this and I'll push you. I took his words completely and I trusted him, and I just held on to this and just relaxed. My legs kind of came off, and I just relaxed, and he went behind me and he started pushing. He kept pushing. And I could feel that he's pushing me, and I actually closed my eyes. I was tired. I was tired from the struggle. I just relaxed, held on to this, and I was just, okay, he's pushing me. That was a hope. He kept pushing me, and once he came, after some distance, he said, okay, can you try and see if you feel anything? I stretched my leg and I said, no, please don't stop, keep pushing. And I could start seeing my kids, Slowly I could see them in the dark. They were still playing. They didn't have any idea what was going on. They were still playing. And nobody on the beach. The best part is that these are 3 little kids playing there and in the dark. And my car is there. But nobody else on the beach. Everyone is gone. And think of this. Nobody even bothered about the kids at that time, saying like, why are you here alone? And why is this car here? Isn't there anybody? Anyway. It's in one way good that they didn't see me, go into the water, because they might step in, and that may be a dangerous thing also. Anyway, they were small. So this guy kept pushing me, and after some time I could see clearly what's going on. The building lights were very visible and all that stuff. So I was getting, and then I could feel that the water is getting warm as well. As I'm getting close to the shore. Feeling warm. And after that he said, okay, now check it out. I stretched my leg out. I could touch the sand barely. I said, okay, I touch it, but now don't stop. Push me. I don't want to do any more, from there. And then after that again it went closer. And when I stretched, I could actually stand with that much water. And then once I was able to get a good grip on the ground, I just dragged myself out. And before even I went out of the water, when I was in knee-deep water, I just wanted to thank him. So I just turned around to thank him, and he was gone. Absolutely empty. There was no sign of life over there, absolutely quiet. And it doesn't seem like he was swimming at all, and there was nobody there. In fact, the water was more clear from that point because the building lights were coming out better. So, and I stared at the water for some time, and I was like, I couldn't believe my eyes as to what exactly happened here. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. And that guy was not to be seen. And there's no reason why he should go back into the water again. And even if he went back into the water, I would have seen him from there. So I faintly saw the head, that's all. Even when he came close, I saw the head. I can't recognize him at all.
Did you see it fail?
Could have been a dolphin.
I don't know.
Yeah, I've been pushed by a dolphin.
Could it be a dolphin? Could it be a mermaid? Huh? A seal? A seal? Anyway, thankfully there was no other creature, pulling my legs from underneath. I never thought of any fish and all that could have really troubled me there. Imagine something's coming and biting from underneath, so that would be tough. Anyway, that was, and all the time this key was in my pocket. It was a bad experience, and at the same time, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. Some people actually asked me, like, did you pray at that time when you were struggling? I said, there's no chance. No chance of thinking of prayer. You are not in that mood at all. Obviously, somebody else must have prayed for me, I'm pretty sure. But at that point, when you're really panicked and suffering and all that, you're not really going to be relaxed. Normally prayer comes in a relaxed atmosphere.
I was born in October 1999. So I have a theory that whoever saved you also delivered me.
I don't know about that. 1999? Well, this was in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi. Yeah. Anyway, it was it must have been some kind of a guardian angel coming in different forms. But I was thinking of some help in some other manner, but this was a different kind of help. And since that person was not seen at all, that's when I started shivering, really. I sat in the water, looking at my kids, looking at the water again, and I was like not able to understand what was going on. I was really shivering. And after some time, it took some time for me to kind of cool down and say, okay, everything's okay. Went back to my car, started the car, and went home. And then I called my wife. She was working night, shift. I called her and told her, like, there was an incident like this, but I didn't explain everything. It was much later that I actually, I was saying this as a testimony, and then that's when she actually heard the whole story. Yeah, it's not something that's... So I don't know why that happened, sunset, and I thought of doing this experiment of floating and all those things at that point. Anyway, I'm still scared of water.
No doubt.
In fact, that incident made my scare more. Now I don't... sometimes I feel like I should learn something, but no way.
Have you ever been to like a shallow pool?
I've been, but again, every time it's not a good experience. The last time I remember was going to Cedar Point. In Cedar Point, there were these black tubes. If you have seen those black tubes, I don't know what they call. Those black tubes, there were around 3-4 entrances for those black tubes, and they kind of coil around like that, and then finally it goes into the pool. The pool, I think, has got only that much water, I think. So my children were actually saying, like, oh, Dad, you can actually do it. It's only this much water, so don't worry about it. Just go, just go, just go. They kind of pushed me to that extent. I said, I don't really want to try it, but then when they said they can, they're ready to do it, and they went earlier, and they said, we'll go down and then we'll wait for you. I felt more confident about it. So I took that blue mat, that kind of mat. Yeah. I took the blue mat and settled on that. And I thought everything's going to go well. As soon as it went in, it was dark. And the first turn that came up, I was underneath and this mat was above me. I was flipped, just like that. I got flipped and the mat was over me and I'm just going backward like this. And I don't know, I said, what is this thing? It is terrible. Like, this mat is above me. It's supposed to be under me. And I was like, where am I going? And spinning around and turning around and water splashing on my face. Horrible. And finally, I said, I have to make a correction somewhere or the other. And there was another turn that came up and I just like riddled. And I got half of the mat under me. And I said, okay, that's better. And finally I did. Oh, that was the last time. I'm not going to do that again.